Well, lots of companies are trying to figure out what's going on right now, given these tariffs, given the uncertainty with Trump. Logistics firms have been bombarded with calls, and that includes our next guest. Greg Timm is the president and chief executive officer of PCB Global Trade Management. What does your company do?
We assist companies shipping across the border, so we help them file paperwork to make sure that they are in compliance with all government regulations and paying all tariffs that are due. And then we assist them making sure they get the most optimized treatment for tariffs.
So think back 6 months ago, and in dealing with the border, all kinds of things can come up at the last moment. A load of stuff. All of a sudden you need to go and help get it across the border or fill out the paperwork. So you had those kinds of emergencies. But compared to 6 months ago, what are things like right now?
Well, in the last 60 days, it's been a lot of uncertainty for sure. Like the Canadian importing, exporting public has been very anxious, and I think that's half of the purpose of this is the disruption that's happened here. I think for the most part, Canada got some good news today, but the auto workers are in trouble a little bit, and the steel workers, and there is a motion before U.S. Congress to try to turn that around a little bit here. So we're hoping if that changes in the next few days, that tariff on Canadian products might go down to 12% from 25%.
Yeah. Now, I know you don't want to, I presume, you can't talk with details about companies you deal with, but in general terms, give me an example of a problem that you've been asked to solve or to help a company out with.
Well, previously, companies shipped across the border duty-free, and it wasn't very heavily examined. Now, companies have to worry about the components of manufacturing parts. So there's lots of products that cross the border that have components from several countries. So now we have to take a look at what's the mix and the percentage of the countries involved with any product to see if it qualifies for the USMCA. So client by client, product by product, we have to break that down and understand that to help the client get the best treatment they can.
I mean, it sounds incredibly complex. What is it actually like?
It's pretty complex. Like there's no magic button for this here. Yeah. We just have to do the work and understand it, and maybe advise the manufacturer. Sometimes they could buy a Canadian product when they are buying something from the USA to put in it, or buy a Canadian product where it is presently purchased in the European Union somewhere. So it's just a time now to regroup and rethink, and Canadian companies are pretty resilient. We think they will.
And so has some of that happened? Have some Canadian companies that are involved in assembly of things, maybe with your advice, sourced parts from Canada instead of the United States?
Yeah, I think we're in that transition point right now. So as we all know, in the first 60 days of this, Canadians were sort of reeling on a feeling of betrayal a little bit. And then we became real and just said, okay, does this affect me, my company, my products? So we're at that point now, and companies are starting to slightly turn now and start to analyze. And like you said, we're getting bombarded with calls for clients to say, can you look at my product list and see how and if I qualify?
Yeah, you must find this frustrating.
It is what it is. Our business is, we don't make a political evaluation here. We are the result of what the political environment is. So I would say the frustration would be on the importers and the exporters, the manufacturers that have relied on a very trusted, reliable business partner and our friend next door for a generation. And now it's time to rethink it a little bit and maybe mitigate or diversify our supply chain or our client base.
So for a lot of companies out there, and I think particularly smaller companies, because the big ones have their corporate staff, but the smaller Canadian manufacturers, and we've been in touch with some of them, and owner-operated, for example, companies that are tearing their hair out. Yeah. What sort of advice do you have for them?
Stay cool and just look at your product mix, learn where you can buy it elsewhere if you have to, and let's take a look to see that, make sure we get you the best preferential treatment you can. What we found in many cases is that Canadian shippers and receivers or importers and exporters are friends, and they are relying on each other, and in some cases they've shared it. So if it's going to be a tariff, we'll pay half, you pay half, and we'll both take a bit of a loss, but it won't kill either of us. So the cooperation between companies and people at the Canadian-U.S. level, we found has been very good. But the political reality is here we are.
seem like a pretty calm guy. That must be very comforting for your clients.
Well, they don't all talk to me, believe me. They're talking to our staff, but our staff have been incredibly professional, and we've encouraged them to stay calm and just be dispensers of good advice, because it is a nervous time, and everybody has been stirred up by this. It's like surreal almost, and our clients are incredibly resilient. They were during the COVID outbreak in 2020. They were during the Great Recession in 2020 or 2008 and 9, and they found ways to get through it. And they were resourceful. They might have changed their product mix or did some things, but Canadian companies will survive here. It's just going to take a little time to diversify, we think.
Well, Greg, really nice having your perspective. Thanks for coming in.